Welcome to the Massage Life Podcast. I'm Jordan Pearson. I'm a CPA, and I'm here with
Melissa
Pearson. You're a registered massage therapist, and I think it's been 3 weeks since we put out our last podcast, which is...
Time flies.
Yeah, disappointing.
You're having fun.
Time flies. It's crazy how quickly time flies. I feel like,
true.
So much has happened over the last 3 weeks. Good things. But so today we're going to be talking about a question that I get a lot, and it's, should I incorporate my business? I think that's a question that registered massage therapists really struggle with for lots of different reasons. And so we're going to talk about that. And I have some opinions. Maybe you'll disagree with these opinions. I don't know. Or maybe you've spoken to your accountant or a lawyer, somebody who has different opinions, and that's fine too. These are just my opinions. And so take it with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, just know that my opinion is the right one. So.
Oh my gosh.
I'm kidding. Okay, we wanted to start with some embarrassing stories, though, because that seems to be what people want to hear. So you had a couple of embarrassing stories that have happened recently to you.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too crazy, but everyone loves a good story.
Yeah.
And we can laugh at ourselves, so...
It's important to laugh at yourself.
It really is.
Yeah. I have lots of reasons to laugh at myself.
Yeah, so recently I was doing an evening massage, and I just had dinner right before going to the massage, and so maybe that was the problem. I don't know. But my stomach was being so loud. And I'm sure every massage therapist can relate that happens sometimes. But this was like next level, okay? This wasn't just like the tummy grumblings. Like something was very wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, it's in like the most quiet room. Like sometimes I'll be next to a room that has a washer and dryer or something like that.
Or the furnace is on.
Yeah, the furnace is on, a fan is
Right.
on, whatever. The dishwasher's running. No, it was like nothing.
The music isn't even loud enough to drown it out?
So this was the other problem. I was trying out some new music, and the music was really strange. It's hard to describe it, but it had like some louder parts and then some quieter parts.
Okay.
And then also each track was really short, like 3 minutes. And then there was, some music like flows into the next track really well, but
Yes.
for some reason it has like a really long
A
gap.
noticeable break.
Yeah, noticeable break between the songs. And of course, those quiet moments were the moments where my stomach decided to growl. It was like, seriously. So it all started like 2 minutes into the massage. And the first growl, it was so loud that sometimes when my stomach growls, I won't say anything because it's like, whatever. They know like it's just natural and normal. And it's just kind of like in the background. I'm not going to point it out or say, excuse me or something, right? So I usually don't say anything, but I had to. First of all, I was like, I didn't want him to think that it was like gas or something like that I farted in the room.
Yeah,
and so I was like, I need to like say something here because it's just so awkward.
So uncomfortable.
And so I just said, oh, sorry. My stomach's being really loud. And he just laughed or something. He's like, oh, you must be hungry. I was like, nope, I literally just ate.
Like, I'm fine.
It was just awkward. And then I was like, okay, whatever, I'm sure that'll be fine. No, it was the entire 60 minutes. It was so much grumbling.
It just wouldn't stop.
Wouldn't stop. It was so bad. And then I was like, what do I even do? So it was especially bad when I was, of course, again, like the most awkward times. I'm so close to his head, like working around his shoulders. And so what I was doing was like reaching, like had the worst body mechanics. I'm like reaching so far away so that my stomach's like as far as possible from his head so that it's not so loud. And
I don't think that helped.
No, probably not.
No. Because I was like, how much?
I'm sure it looks so ridiculous. Yeah,
Yeah, you probably only widened the gap by
like a foot or two, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, that's not doing anything.
I was desperate. I was trying.
Do you think he noticed that you were like...
I'm like stretching. It's like just the fingertips.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
you got like fake arms. You're just like...
it was bad.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So was it just that person, or were you massaging the whole family that night?
No, I had to go see someone else. I don't know. The second one, I think it was kind of bad too, but their house was louder. They had like kids and stuff, and
Right.
It wasn't as noticeable for that second one.
That's
also
funny.
The second person, like I've been friends with her for a long time, and so I don't know. This one was like, especially because it was a male. I don't know, something about the whole thing.
It's just
and he's kind of just like, he's like a very nice guy, but very kind of socially awkward, and so both of us were just like. I don't know. It was just, you just had to be there. It was awkward.
I feel like everyone is socially awkward in some situations, right? Like I think for most of the time I'm okay, but then every now and then there's just I meet someone and I don't know. It's just
sometimes
weird.
you don't vibe with the other person. It's
Yeah.
obviously going to be worse if both people are kind of socially awkward. I don't feel like I'm a socially awkward person, but I have moments where I can just feel it in the moment, and then the harder I try to not be awkward, the more awkward I am. Right? I'm like, I notice it. I'm like, I am awkward right now. Like I am making this very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I try to fix it. it just goes downhill.
But sometimes I'm awkward with people that I'm not usually awkward with.
Really?
And I think it's just because I get exhausted. Maybe I'm too tired and I just like
Can't be bothered.
I can't be bothered. I don't want to talk to you right now. Oh, that's so funny.
So yeah, that.
It's funny. We finished recording Chad Friel's range of motion course last Saturday.
Yeah,
and
it was so great.
Yeah, I finished editing it yesterday. There's like one little piece that I need to touch up, but for the most part, it's done. And there were a couple moments, same problem. So when I'm editing these courses, I have really nice headphones on so that I can really hear every sound that is picked up by the microphone. And your stomach, same thing, because you were sitting sort of close to the
Really close to the
microphone.
microphone, yeah.
And yeah, so I had to drop the audio. Thankfully, it would happened. Well, maybe it was happening all the time, but you could really notice it when Chad wasn't talking, right?
Yeah.
If he was doing a range of motion test or whatever. And so there was no sound. It's
In the background.
yeah, for sure. And I'm the person on the table that he's treating. And so for sure someone taking this course is going to think like, man, Jordan's got some wicked gas, or well, this hip flexion is really pushing that, really moving things along. Oh man,
I need to
this
see,
has
like,
been
a
bowel
G-
talk with
GI
Jordan.
specialist or something. I have a food insensitivity.
Well, for the two people who have are still listening, let's talk about.
We were going to share our other story from the hotel too.
I don't know that we should.
Oh,
'cause
what?
That's really embarrassing. That's really embarrassing. How about
Now
we,
everyone's guessing what.
yeah, so we'll tease it out. So Melissa and I, we went to Banff. For those of you who are not in Alberta, Banff is.
Everyone knows where Banff
Well,
is.
I know everyone knows where Banff is. It's like 2 hours away from where we live. We went to Banff for the weekend. Not the weekend, just for a night, Thursday night to Friday. And we took our kids with us. And anyways, we had a really embarrassing experience.
What? We can share it?
We'll share it at the end. We'll tease it out. Let's
Okay,
talk
fine.
about,
At the end.
should I incorporate my business?
Okay. Talk about stuff we
Um,
actually people.
yeah,
need to
let's talk
listen
about something that people are going to care about. Not that they'll want to, that they won't care about hearing the embarrassing things that we've done. Anyways, okay. So, should you incorporate your business? Well, I think for registered massage therapists, let me just start at a really high level. I think in most cases for registered massage therapists in Canada, it doesn't make sense for them to incorporate their business. And when you're wrestling with this decision, I'll just kind of touch on the main thing. So I'll talk about some advantages and some disadvantages to incorporating your business. But the main thing, in my opinion, that you should ask yourself when you're wrestling with this question, should I incorporate my business, is how much money do you make? Number one, how much money do you anticipate making? And number two, are you going to need all of that money to live, right? Or the majority of that money to live? If the answer to the second question is all of it or mostly all of it, then from a purely income tax perspective, it doesn't make sense to incorporate your business.
Okay, why is that?
The reason why, so the best way that I can explain it is so I feel like I should back up. So when you incorporate your business, there's essentially two types of businesses that you can operate as. There's more than that, but we'll just look at the main two. So you have a sole proprietorship and then a corporation, right? So when registered massage therapists, they come out of school and then they get their first job working at a spa or a clinic, they sign an independent contractor agreement, right? In most cases, they're not working as employees, okay? And so they're working as independent contractors. And so the moment they sign that contract, they're establishing themselves as a business and they are working as a sole proprietor, okay? So they own a sole proprietorship, okay? So there's no legal distinction between you and your business when you're operating as a sole proprietor, okay? They're one and the same. So any business any income that your business generates is going to be taxed to you personally, right? Like you file your personal income tax return and you're going to claim all of that as business income minus any business deductions that you have, okay? It's all going to be claimed on your personal income tax return. When you incorporate a business, you're setting up a totally separate legal entity, right? So, there's incorporation documents that you have to fill out. You have to register this as a separate legal entity. And it's separate in a very legal sense. Like the government of Canada recognizes this as a totally separate legal entity from you, the person, right? So you're going to be a shareholder of that corporation, but from an income tax perspective, you have to file 2 separate income tax returns. So you're still going to file your personal income tax return, but then the business, the corporation, has to file a corporate income tax return. A T2 is what it's called. So it's helpful to know that there's that distinction.
Right.
Okay. So from a purely income tax perspective, if you're taking everything out of that corporation, well, you're going to lose the income tax benefits that are afforded to corporations, right?
So just to clarify, so corporations are taxed at a different tax rate than
Right.
personal, correct?
Right.
And that's
So
why most people want to incorporate, is to take
Right. That's
advantage
usually
of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's usually the main thing that people will talk about is, I want to pay less tax, right? And so how it works, let's just look at a hypothetical situation. So let's assume, Melissa, that you decided to incorporate your business. So now you've set up this separate legal entity and you're working throughout the year and you go to file your income tax return at the end of the year and you recognize that, okay, the business made $80,000 in income that year, okay? But then you took all of that out. You paid yourself an $80,000 salary, okay? Well, effectively, the business income is what?
Zero.
It's zero, right? So if the net income of the business was $80,000, but you paid all of that out to you, either as a dividend or as a salary, well, the income of the business is zero, and so there's no taxable income, and so there's no income tax to pay in the business because you've taken it all out personally, and so you're now going to be taxed at the personal level, right? So
The full
really,
amount,
so really you lose the benefits that come from setting up a corporation, right? Because you've taken all of that money out. And so,
And even if you kept in a small amount, say you kept in $10,000, probably wouldn't really be worth it.
well, it could be, right? So for the Online Wellness Institute is incorporated in the province of Alberta. So we've set that up as a corporation. And since day one, we haven't taken any money out of this business, right? So it has earned income and it's been taxed at the lower corporate rates. And so what we're effectively doing is we're deferring tax, right? By keeping it in the corporation, by not paying it out to ourselves, we're paying a lower income tax rate on that income within the business. And we knew that when we set up this business. We knew because we have, I have a full-time job and
Yeah,
you
it's not our
work,
sole source
right?
of income.
It's not our sole source of income. It's just, it's a fun side project. And so we wanted to set it up that way for other reasons as well. And we'll get into those in just a second. But from a purely income tax perspective, it made sense, right? Because we didn't want all of that income to be taxed at the higher personal income tax rates. We wanted it to stay in the corporation and be taxed at the lowest rates possible. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I think that was pretty clear. It made sense to you. Okay, so a couple of the advantages. So number one is limited liability. So going back to what I said at the beginning, when you set up a corporation, it's a separate legal entity, and so there's limited liability, or there's a separation of liability between the corporation and its shareholders, right? So if the corporation is sued for whatever reason, they can't go after, in most cases, they can't go after the shareholders of that corporation, right? They have to go after the corporation itself. And so it's a way for you to be able to limit your own personal liability, right? Because Melissa, if you are operating a business and you're operating as a sole proprietor, and then for whatever reason you get sued, right? They come after you, they come after your business. Well, now you've opened up yourself to a lot of liability, a lot of risk. They can come after your personal assets, right? So let's say, you had to go to court and then, the ruling was not in your favor and you had to pay X amount of money to this other party, and maybe you didn't have insurance because there was gross negligence involved, and there's, a lot of messy things going on. And so if you had to pay out a sizable amount of money to this other party, and, you didn't have that money, but you had a car and a house, right? Well, now your personal assets are being impacted by this. And so setting up a corporation is a way for you to limit that liability. It's a way for you to essentially limit your risk exposure so that, your personal assets are effectively safeguarded from.
A way to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's a way to protect yourself. Now, what's interesting about that, though, is I feel like for most corporations that are owned by one or two people, so a very small number of shareholders, well, in a way, you're still going to be exposed to a lot of that risk, right? So let me walk you through an example. Let's say you set up your massage business as a corporation, and then you were sued for whatever reason, and you had to pay out all this money, right? Okay, that person, that you had to pay this money out to, they, legally they can't come after your personal assets. And I'm not a lawyer. I think that's technically how it works. But they can't come after your personal assets. But this business, this corporation is your baby, right? You're the sole shareholder. And so you care about making sure that this business stays afloat, that it doesn't go bankrupt or go under. And so you may be inclined as the sole shareholder to continue to pump capital into this corporation, to continue to put money into it so that it doesn't die, right? So I see where people are coming from, that they want to limit their liability, but in some weird roundabout way, because you as the sole shareholder care about keeping this business alive, you're going to do everything that you can to maintain it, to keep it going.
Right.
And so, you may be inclined to continue to put more money into it, or you may be totally fine with just like, okay, well, the business is bankrupt now, I'll just walk away and start over, right? And that may be okay as well. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the legal nuances. I've never been sued personally, and so I don't know, exactly
it'd be really
how that
interesting
works.
to talk to somebody who.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, just looking at it from the perspective of a massage therapist. So a lot of people, I've heard a lot of therapists talk about this. They want to incorporate their business to limit their liability, and that's fair, right? They recognize that is one of the advantages to being incorporated. But how many massage therapists do you know that have been sued?
Well,
right?
and
I don't know. Not to say that it hasn't happened,
Yeah,
but I
I'm
don't
sure it
know
happens.
anyone.
Well, we have insurance.
Right.
A lot of, if any legal cases were to come up, we have insurance through our association. So.
Right. And so one thing I want to say about that, and I don't know exactly how it works, but I remember when I was taking so in university, getting my degree, I had to take a business law class, and we talked about gross negligence. So I think in your case, like your coverage for insurance as a massage therapist, I feel like that wouldn't cover you in situations where you are guilty of gross negligence. And
Right.
what I mean by that is like you have made an error that no reasonable massage therapist who is trained would expect to make.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And so, like even that, it's like, well, it's very rare that you're going to do something.
Yeah, it would be something crazy like lighting 1,000 candles in your massage room
Right,
or
right.
something like that, where it's like,
Right.
hey, that was totally irrational and crazy.
That's a perfect example though.
Yeah.
Right?
And so my coverage probably wouldn't cover me lighting 1,000 candles in my massage room.
Right. And so it's interesting to, just be aware of that.
Right.
Anything else?
So just don't do anything crazy.
Yeah, just
if you're not incorporated, don't do anything nuts so that
well, and I think so when you're talking about limited liability, if it's just you, right? If it's, you've incorporated a business and you're the only one that's working for that business, right? You say you work out of your home or you run a mobile practice or you work in a spa, right? Your risk is so low because it's just you. Right? But if I decided to go out today and open up a spa and hire 15 to 20 therapists to work for me, well, now my risk exposure is so much greater. Right?
Other people
Because I have
involved.
all these therapists and I trust that they know what they're doing, but they may do something that's really dumb, right? Like come in and light 1,000 candles or whatever.
Right.
Who
Or
knows?
you have receptionists too, maybe aren't handling clients' confidentiality properly.
Right.
Or
There's
who
so
knows
many.
what- yeah.
There's so many things that you can be accused of from a legal standpoint, and so it's in a situation like that. Well, it would be insane, right? It would be insane to
not
operate a
incorporate, yeah.
clinic as a sole proprietor, right? Because if one of your therapists does something stupid and you get sued, well, now you're personally liable for that.
Yeah.
And so your risk
Lose your
exposure
house
is
or
so much
something.
greater.
Yeah.
So, when you're looking at that decision, should I incorporate my business? Well, like if it's just you, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense for you to incorporate your business if it's just you, right? Okay. So some of the other advantages is access to capital. I don't think that this is, so I'm just looking at kind of the high level, like a lot of the advantages that come with being a corporation. This is not something that is really relevant to massage therapists too much. So when I say access to capital, the best example that I can think of is, I'm sure you've seen the show Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. Is Dragon's Den, is that still a show or is it Shark Tank now?
No, I think one's Canadian, one's American.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't remember
So,
which is which.
yeah, there's these shows, and I'm sure all of you know how they operate. You have these businesses that come in and they pitch their idea or their business to a panel of investors, right? And then they say, okay, I will sell you 10% of my business in exchange for $200,000 or whatever, right? What they're looking to get is capital, right? As a corporation, you can issue shares and you can sell those shares, right? A portion of your business, like 10%, 20%, whatever, 100%, you can sell a share of your business to somebody else in exchange for capital.
For money.
For money, right? Yeah, when I say capital, I mean cash.
I mean, I'm sure everyone knows
right?
that. But...
So it's a way for you to raise capital so that you can grow your business, right? And for a lot of businesses, that makes sense, right? For a lot of these people that go onto Shark Tank, they usually have a product that they're trying to manufacture, that they're trying to scale and get to market. And so that's going to require a lot of capital, right? You need cash to be able to manufacture that product, to market it and get it to market. But for a registered massage therapist, we've talked about this, I think, in an earlier episode, the startup cost for a massage therapist is typically quite low. Now, that's not the case if you're wanting to open up your own space, like a spa or a clinic, right? There's, we looked at that, right? We looked at doing that a couple of years ago, and we priced it all out, and it was,
that's for sure.
It was going to cost a lot of money, and so there would be some capital that we would need, and if you're doing that, if you're looking to open up a clinic, it might make sense for you to reach out to a friend or some other investor and say, hey, here's my business plan. I'm looking to open up a clinic. I'll give you 20% of the business in exchange for, 40 grand or whatever.
But you have to be incorporated.
But you don't, and that's the thing, you don't, right, necessarily. Like you could operate as a sole proprietor, but it would just be a loan. Like this person's just giving you a loan.
What about going to the bank for a loan? Like, do they look at that? Do they look at if you're incorporated or not? Do they care if they're giving out a loan?
Yeah, so yes. So this brings up another question. So there's, and I don't know that we want to go down this rabbit hole, but there's effectively two ways that you can finance your business, right? So the first way is capital, right? So you give me cash in exchange for shares, okay? And then I'm not legally obligated to, like, I don't have to pay you anything back at any time. Just typically with preferred, oh man, I don't really want to go. Okay, so there's common shares and there's preferred shares. So preferred shares typically have like an interest component tied to them. Like I'll be required to pay, and interest isn't the right word, like a dividend that's paid out on a recurring basis out to those shareholders. Okay. But for common shares, right, there's no, like, I don't have to pay you anything. Right? If the business loses its value, like if the business goes bankrupt and you're a common shareholder, well, the value of those common shares has effectively gone to zero, right? And that's happened to me. I've purchased shares in companies on the open market. There was a mining company that I bought because somebody told me it was a good deal. Never take tips from your friends. Yeah. But I purchased common shares in this company. That company went bankrupt. Well, the value of those shares effectively went to zero. I lost everything, right? And so when you invest in a company, so let's say you're purchasing common shares, if the value of that business goes up, then the value of your investment also goes up.
And the way you make money off it is when you sell your shares.
Yeah, when you sell your shares, you cash them in, and hopefully you turn a profit that way.
Right.
So that's one way. So you have this capital injection, this exchange of cash for shares. The other option is debt, right? So you can go to the bank, you can go to Joe Blow down the street, right? But how that works is there's interest and principal payments. There's a debt repayment that's required, right? So if I lend, $100,000 from the bank, well, there's going to be a term to that loan, right? Depending on whether it's a line of credit or a fixed loan. So if it's a line of credit, usually you only have to pay the interest, like a small amount of principal and then the interest. If it's a fixed term loan, then it's similar to a mortgage, right? You'd have to pay, fixed principal and interest payments every month until you pay it off over whatever the term is.
Right.
So you certainly can go to the bank if you want. But it's good to know that this, as a corporation, you can sell a portion of the business in exchange for cash. Right. So access to capital is one of the advantages. The other thing is the ability to sell, right? So I was actually thinking about this today, because my parents, we always have dinner with my parents on Sunday, and I was thinking about the future of the Online Wellness Institute. And there will come a day when, we want to retire and, cash out.
Your dad's talking about retiring.
Yeah, my dad's talking about retiring, and he's in the funeral industry. And so he had established a funeral home many years ago, and there was some issues with that, but, that's a whole nother story. But I was just thinking about the Online Wellness Institute, and, I don't know that, unless Abby or, Ashton or Warren, so one of our kids decides to go into the massage industry and the profession and work in that field, it's like, this is such a unique niche business. Mm-hmm. It'll be a hard one for us to just like pass on to, someone within the family. So we either have to sell it to someone else or just fold the business entirely, which I don't think we'll do because we've built these assets. And I mean, who knows what the continuing education landscape will look like in 20 to 30 years, right? When we're looking to retire, who knows, right? But that being said, you can do that as a corporation. Like, I could take all of the shares for the Online Wellness Institute, of which you owe 51% and I owe 49, so you're the majority shareholder because it was your idea. But we could take those shares and we can sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? If there's somebody that wants to buy this business from us, we can say, okay, typically how that would work is you'd have an accountant come in and value the business, right? And say, okay, this is how much the business is worth, right? The value of the shares. And there's lots of different ways that you can value a business. We won't go down that road. It's so funny. I just love talking about this stuff, and I'm sure people are just glazed over. But and so you effectively sell all of the common shares to somebody else.
Right.
And now the business is owned and managed and operated by that other person. Right. And they get to do with it how they want.
Right.
And so there are benefits, right? Like if you're establishing a clinic or a spa and you've built up clientele and you have a reputation, you have a brand name that is recognized, right? Like, there's a lot of spas that come to mind that we know of in Calgary that, they've put a lot of work into establishing their brand and their reputation, establishing their reputation. They have, huge clientele and infrastructure and, all these systems in place. And so it would be a lot of work for someone to start from scratch and build that. Like, you can, right? Or you can just, hey, I want to buy that business. Mm-hmm. How much do you want for this business? I'll buy it from you.
So
right?
Because I'm sole proprietor right now.
Yeah.
And would it be impossible for me to sell my business? Like, how would that work? That wouldn't work.
No. So what you would do is you would sell off the assets.
Okay.
That are tied to the business, because that's all that you have.
Right.
Right. So you have, the physical assets that you have, like the massage table. But I think about all of the clients.
Yeah. How does that work?
That you have. Well, you could.
Can you sell your client list?
I think so. I don't know how. Legally, I don't know how that would.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Work. But I don't know. I don't know that would even make sense in this profession, because like, you are the business, right? Like, those clients are loyal to you for the most part.
Right. And I've even noticed that I hired someone about 6 months ago, and it's been okay. It's gone all right. But a lot of my clients are like, we just want to see you. Like, we've built up this professional relationship.
And that's
with
true.
You
shouldn't put down your contractor, because that's true about her as well. There's some clients who are like, we love Heather.
Yeah. No, I'm not. And it's not that they've tried her, they don't like her. They don't even want to try someone else, because they're like, we just like what we're already doing, and it's already established. And so it'd be interesting to ever try to. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens to my business when I eventually decide to leave massage
Right.
altogether.
And well, what, if you were to die tomorrow, I mean, that would be tragic, but like, because you're operating as a sole proprietor right now, the business dies with you.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
Right.
I would file your last income tax return, and then, I'd claim any business income that you had earned up to this point, and then like, that would be it.
Right.
Right. I could look at what I could do is, because you have built a reputation in Chestermere, and there's that name, Lakeview Mobile Massage, that has, you've established a reputation. There's good reviews on Google. Like, you've built that. Like, there is something there. What I would probably do is I would incorporate the business, and then I would see if I could hire someone. It's like, here I have, all of these clients that my wife has, she's established this business, and I would see if I could make it work somehow. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Incorporate it after I die?
Yeah.
You could?
Yeah. I would incorporate. I would be the sole shareholder. I would use that name
Yeah.
in all the branding that you've set up.
Can you do that? Even though it's in, like my what's it called? I was gonna say brand name. That's not the right word. Lakeview Mobile Massage. I had to.
Yeah, you registered. So you registered that trade name.
Trade name. That's the word.
Yeah, you registered that trade name.
But it's under my name, so
you don't own that name.
I don't own that name.
No.
Well, okay. That's
No,
I
can go, and I think we talked about that in another episode.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I can
Because
go
I'm
and
not
I can
incorporated.
register that same trade name.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so when you set up a corporation, you have to do that nuance search
Yeah.
where you look up the names of any other incorporated businesses that are the same or similar. But when you register just a trade name, you don't have to do that.
Right.
It's good practice to do, because you don't want to come into a
that
city
makes
and
it
it's like,
confusing.
oh, this business is operating under this name, but I like that name. I want to operate under that exact same name. Well, it's like, that's going to be confusing
Yeah. For both.
for everyone,
Yeah.
right? Like, for your business, the other business, people aren't going to know who's who. Like, it just doesn't work, right? But for you, like, if you die, you're out of the picture, right? Like, I'll just... Why are we talking about this like it's like gonna happen?
I want to know. You told me I was gonna die tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm just planning here.
I would, if you died tomorrow, I would just curl up in a ball on the floor and just be grief stricken.
You did say that today. You said you died.
I don't know what I would do. Like, it's hard for me to articulate just how much I love you. Like, there's just, and I don't want to get all like mushy on this podcast,
It's
but
a
like,
Valentine's Day podcast.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
Valentine's soon.
I love, there's so much that I love about you, and we've been married for over 16 years now, and I don't know, like, you are a brilliant person when it comes to like how you run and operate your business. Like, and I see, like, you have a reputation in the massage profession. Like, people know who you are, and they come to you with questions. Like, I always ask you, like, oh, what are you doing on your phone, right? Not because I'm like trying to be snoopy, but it's usually always like, oh, I'm answering somebody's direct billing question. It's like, of course you are, right? Like, maybe you should charge for that, because it seems to be what you're always doing. Anyways,
You're
okay,
cute.
moving on. Yes, I do love you. I don't think I could ever marry anyone else if you died.
That would be so weird.
Just become a recluse. I'd find another massage therapist that looks exactly like you.
That's weird.
Okay, this is getting weird. Okay. The next advantage, tax deferral. We already talked about that. So that's like, okay, I'm going to keep this money in the corporation. I'm going to keep this income. Sorry, not money.
Can we have a question about tax deferrals? People often talk about that, even with TFSAs, where people say, oh, shelter your tax, defer the tax. But I don't get that. So why? I either have to pay the tax today or I pay the tax in 10 years. Who cares? Why? Why is that an advantage?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, because essentially what you're asking is, well, if I'm going to have to pay the tax now or when I'm 65, like, why not just pay it now? Is that effectively, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? Why would I defer it? So the simplest answer to that question is, you have to think about when you're 65 and you retire, you're going to need less money to live, right? Because hopefully by then you've paid off your mortgage, right? And so really all that you need, like, I think about my parents, well, their only expense is the cost to heat their house and then the food that they eat, right? And so your expenses go down significantly when you retire. And so you defer the income until then, and then you're taking out less from your retirement savings. And so you're going to be taxed at a lower rate because you're taking out less.
You're in a lower income tax
Yeah, you're
bracket?
in a lower income tax bracket. Because
Right.
all of the money that you're putting into your... So how it works is all of the money you put into your retirement savings plan, okay, it's going to stay in your RSP until you turn 65 or 70 or whenever you decide to retire. And then you convert that RSP into what's called a RIF. So it's called an RRIF, or Registered Retirement Income Fund. Okay. And it's effectively the same as a pension. So you then say, okay, I'm done saving for my retirement, converting this into an income fund, and I'm now going to pay myself money from that income fund every month, or every, like, however frequently you want to, right? And then that becomes the money or the income that you use to live. Now, when you take the income out of that retirement income fund, you're taxed on that, right? Because you've deferred it till then. So you're still taxed on it, but you're taking out less because you have fewer expenses. And so you pay less. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And for, so that being said, so the other thing, let's say that you're a sole proprietor and you're in a situation where you're actually making a lot and you don't need all of that to live. And so if you look at that, well, there's some advantages. There appear to be some advantages to incorporation because you can now keep some of the income in the corporation and defer it until later, right? Until you decide to take the money out of the corporation. Well, what you can do, if you have room in your retirement savings plan, which most people do because who's able to max that out? Well, just put that excess into an RSP, and then you're going to get the tax savings that come from contributing to your RSP, and you've effectively done the same thing, right? The contributions that you put into your retirement savings plan, you can, you're not taxed on that as you're deferring the tax until when you retire.
Right.
And so for massage therapists who are in a situation like that, that's what I would recommend, right? If you don't want to go through the hoopla of incorporating, like just
because you
just
haven't really
max
talked
out your
about that
RSP.
too much. Like, what is what is the hoopla involved with incorporating? Because it's not just as easy as, say, registering a trade name. Because registering a trade name is like a very simple thing to do. You walk in, you fill it. It's like literally a 1-page document. Boom, you're done. Whereas incorporating, there's a lot more involved with it, and it's expensive to do in the first place. And then you have to do this tax return every year. That's complicated and an expensive tax return, right? And don't you have to do something else weird, like halfway through the year?
Well, there's
what other things you have to do?
So there's an annual return that you have to. So it's just like a declaration of like who the shareholders are. Just basically, you're telling the government. So in the province of Alberta, we've registered the Online Wellness Institute, and so we have to fill out this annual return every year, and it's like, I forget how much it is, like $100 maybe more. I can't remember. Whatever, I just pay it. But we have to file that, and it says like, okay, still a registered business. These are the shareholders.
That's not a tax return. It's
not a tax return.
report.
This is just an annual filing that we have to do with the government. But then, you have to file a T2 corporate tax return, and I'll be honest, I don't even do those myself because they're confusing. Like I'm a chartered professional accountant. I have gone through 4 years of university and then training as a CPA. Like I know what I'm doing as an accountant. But even I don't have experience filing T2 corporate tax returns. And so I pay someone else to do it, right? Because I can't be bothered. I don't know how to do it.
So it's not something people can usually do on their own. They're going to have to hire someone to do it.
I mean, I probably... our taxes are really simple. Like the corporate structure for the Online Wellness Institute is really simple. I'm sure I could, but it's also a time thing. It's just
sometimes it's just easier. Yeah.
I just can't be bothered, right? And so maybe that'll come as a shock to some. It's like, here's an accountant paying another accountant to do like this work. It's
people do that all the time with things like,
Yeah.
I don't know, if you're an interior designer, you still sometimes get someone else come and do your things, or
It's like, I can't be bothered. It's like, Kevin, Jensen, can you just like file this income tax return for me?
So how much does that usually cost, like a corporate tax filing? Do you have a ballpark number?
I don't actually know because
Again, I just pay
my guess would be, and it depends. It depends how complicated, because there's there are so many things that can come into play with your corporation that can make it really complicated,
Yeah.
right? Do you have common shares? Do you have preferred shares? Did you issue dividends? Like what type of
Yeah.
dividends did you issue? Do you have, employees that you paid out? Do you have CPP? And like there's all these things. Like do you have T4s you need to file? Like there's all these things that come into play with that. And so for us, I tried to get Kevin to charge me for filing our T2 last year, and he said, "Oh, just pay whatever you think is reasonable." It's like,
I hate when people say things like that.
like
Pay me what
you
you think
operate a
is good.
business. Like, tell me, like, send me an invoice and I'll pay it. Anyways, I never paid him anything.
Pay what you think's good. How about 0?
Yeah, how about 0?
Okay, but regardless, like you're gonna have to pay for the corporate tax return and your personal. You still have to file your personal taxes too.
yeah.
I mean, probably they'll do both at the same time, depending on who your
right,
accountant
totally.
is, whatever.
Yeah.
But
It makes sense.
It's going to be more expensive.
Yeah, I would say anywhere within the ballpark of 150 to 250 plus. Right. For like somebody who's operating, like for a
simple-
massage therapist that's incorporated, I would expect it to be within that range.
Right.
Somewhere. We'll come back to that in just a second. The last thing on my advantages list is credibility. But again, I don't think that this is... So some people, they want to incorporate their business because there's an air of credibility that comes with doing that, right? What it says to people is I've gone through the whole, legal process of setting this up as a corporation, right? And so there's some credibility that comes with that. But when have you ever had clients ask you, like, "Oh,
No.
are you incorporated or are you a sole proprietor?" Nobody freaking cares, right? Do you give a good massage? That's all I care about, right? I don't care about the legal structure of your business,
Yeah.
right? But for, in some situations, it is important, right? What is the legal structure of your business? I want to know because I only want to do business with someone who's incorporated for whatever reason.
Yeah. Or
Anyways.
some other fields, it might be important. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Disadvantages. So tax integration. So I kind of touched on this a little bit. So when for the most part, the CRA has set up the tax rules in such a way that if you pay all the income, like whether the corporation earns income and then you pay all that to yourself, like the tax is going to be the same at the end of the day. Right. And so, unless you're deferring the tax, right, and it's staying in the corporation, like we talked about, then it makes sense for you to from a purely income tax perspective, then it makes sense to incorporate. The higher administrative costs, obviously that's a big one, right? Just to set up the corporation, so there's a couple ways that you can do it. You can hire a lawyer to do it for you because there's a lot of stuff that's involved. And so if you want to make sure that it's done right, you can hire someone to help you with that process. They're going to charge you, I would expect, anything, no less than $1,000 to incorporate a business.
Right.
If you want to just do it on your own, right, and make sure you get all your ducks in a row, and a big part of it is going down to the registries and you fill out all the paperwork and set up a corporation, which is what we did. I think it cost me $550 to incorporate the business in Alberta. So that right there, you have an upfront cost that is fairly significant just to incorporate the business. Right. And then there's requirements on an ongoing basis, right? Like that annual return that you have to file. And there's like record keeping that's required, right? Like you have to have like board minutes and a share register that you have to maintain. There's all these like other things that you need to keep track of. And so again, those are things that from my perspective as an accountant, like I'm aware of what's required and I feel quite comfortable managing that stuff on my own. But if you have no idea even what a share register is or like board minutes and like what all that stuff looks like, or how often you need to be meeting as a board or what a board is, right? Like, those are things that you may want to outsource that. You may want a lawyer to help you with some of that. And so again, that's going to be a cost to you on just every year you're going to have to deal with that.
And if not a cost, at least a cost in your time.
Right.
Maybe you're not expensing that to someone else, but you're for sure going to take some time to figure that stuff out.
Right. And then we've already touched on these other things. So reporting requirements and then separate income tax returns, right? So you now have to file a corporate return and a personal return. Again, that's going to cost you money. And then just like time in terms of like proper record keeping,
Yeah.
right? So if you need to make sure that you have good financial records,
Right.
that everything's kept separate from you personally, and that you're managing things properly, and that it's all your ducks are in a row. So so one of the questions that I often, well, nobody ever asked me this question, but one of the questions that I think about is, okay, so when you look at a sole proprietor versus a corporation, are there things that you're allowed to write off as a corporation that you're not allowed to write off as a sole proprietor? And for the most part, the answer to that question is no, right? If it's a reasonable business expense, an expense that has helped you generate business income, then that's something that you can write off. The one thing that is different, though, and it is the main reason why I wish you were incorporated, and do you know what the answer is?
Kilometers.
Kilometers, yeah. So if you are a sole proprietor and you use your vehicle, so you're a mobile therapist, so you're driving all over the place, and so you have to keep a vehicle log, and you have to keep a record of all of the expenses that you've incurred on that vehicle. So gas receipts, any oil changes that are done, any other maintenance, registration, like all of that stuff, insurance. You have to keep records of all of those expenses. And then at the end of the year, you take your vehicle log and you determine, okay, I used my vehicle 20% for business. Well, I get to now write off 20% of all of these expenses, right? Or maybe it's 30% or whatever your vehicle log says.
But and you have to keep that log.
And you have to keep the log. Now there's a simplified log that you can also keep. Like, I think, what is it? You have to, you keep the log for just 3 months. And if it's within the range of what it was the previous year, then you can stop it. You can stop there.
And just do that average from the previous year.
But that being said, you still have to keep all those receipts.
Yeah.
You have to keep a record of all of those expenses. And so it's just it's really annoying. And it's really annoying from a bookkeeping standpoint, because so we use QuickBooks for your business, and I love QuickBooks, but it's really annoying when you have the personal receipts, because I don't want to scan those personal receipts, like those gas receipts, into the business, because it's not a business expense. Part of it will be, and so it's just you kind of have to keep separate record keeping for those vehicle expenses, and it's just super annoying. Whereas if you're incorporated, you just keep track of the kilometers that you drive. So there's still a log requirement, right? You need to have a record of okay, on this date, I drove this many kilometers. But then all you do is you just take those kilometers and you multiply it by the CRA's prescribed rate, right? And that's your expense.
Right.
And you're done. It's so much easier.
It's weird that they don't let you do that as a sole proprietor. Why? That's so dumb.
Yeah, I don't know.
There is another expense too that I'm pretty sure you can only write off if you're incorporated.
What's that?
Do you remember that one?
I don't know. Now you're testing me. I don't know.
At least
Who's the expert here?
At least I'm pretty sure because I looked into it. It's
I'm gonna fold my arms like I'm really defensive. Right?
It's a health spending account. So there's this.
Yes.
There's this company that has.
Yeah.
That has. I don't know entirely how it works, but you can set up a health spending account and run any expenses, health expenses, like going for a massage. Right now, I don't have benefits, and so what I could do if I was incorporated is run my expenses for a massage or for acupuncture or something, run it through this health spending account, and then it becomes a write-off that way.
And
but you can't. But I was I should do that, but you can only do it if you're incorporated.
Yeah, and that's such a great idea, because now it's a way for you to write off those massage expenses, which you otherwise normally wouldn't be allowed to write off, or even include as part of the medical expense tax credit.
Yeah.
Because
in Alberta.
In Alberta, because massage therapists are not registered in Alberta, and so any massage expenses can't be included in the medical expenses tax credit for income tax purposes.
Yeah.
But yeah, having that health spending account
It's a really good, even all your dental stuff.
Right. Now that's different from, so we want to make the distinction. So because we're kind of talking about two different things. Because you can, if you are paying premiums to a private health insurance plan, like Alberta Blue Cross or Sun Life or whatever, right? So you're paying into a plan, there's a monthly premium, and then in exchange for that, you get coverage for medical, dental, drug coverage, all of those things. if the primary source of your income as a sole proprietor is like one thing, you get to write off all of those. Like if it just comes from one source, you can write off those premiums through your business as a sole proprietor, whereas you would otherwise include it as part of the medical expense tax credit. And so that's separate from what you're talking about, this
Right.
health spending account. So it's effectively what you're doing is you pay into this health spending account. It's just like a pool of money, and then you withdraw from it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, I'm submitting my massage to this health spending account. Well, that expense through the health spending account now becomes a business expense for the corporation. Right?
They do
And-
take a fee off of it. Like
Right.
there's some, obviously it's a business.
Right, totally.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. If I didn't want to do that and I didn't want to incorporate, then my other option is to pay into Blue Cross or something similar,
Right.
and that could be tax write-off that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all that I have, right? So, I mean, I know that it's a question that a lot of people wrestle with. So you have to, massage therapist listening to this, like at the end of the day, you have to decide for yourself, right?
And everyone's situation is so different.
Yeah, every situation is so different and so unique, and I don't want to be, I don't want to make this blanket statement and say like all massage therapists shouldn't be incorporated, because that's definitely not true. Like there are lots of situations where I think it would make sense, even for somebody who's just operating out of their home and it's just them, right? If you're making a ton of money and you just don't need it and you just want to defer it, and maybe you've maxed out your RSP and it just makes sense, like great. And so, but for most massage therapists, I think it becomes an unnecessary burden, right? From just an administrative perspective, and then just for like the ongoing cost and like the record keeping requirements, and making sure that, you should always have good financial records even if you're a sole proprietor, but it's just there's just a lot more that's involved, and so I generally don't recommend that massage therapists do it. Now that being said, consult with your accountant or lawyer, or just look at your own situation. But hopefully this has been helpful. Just a couple things for people to consider, advantages and disadvantages. So, and I'd love to hear from people. If you disagree with some of the things that we've said, I don't think we've said anything wrong. Like I've spent a lot of time researching this, and I've talked to. It's funny. I had lunch with a CPA friend of mine, because we accountants, we like to get together and just talk about.
You have friends?
I have friends. Well, this was a while ago, but we were talking about this question, like, should you incorporate? And before I could even say my take on it, he was like, the number one question I always ask people is like, how much money are you going to make, and are you going to need all of it? And I was like, yes, thank you, right? Because I hear a lot of people talk about this, and I feel like they don't give enough attention to that piece, and it frustrates me so much.
Well, a lot of people I've heard numbers being tossed around. I can't remember what the current number is, but it's usually $100,000. Once you make $100,000, then you should incorporate. And it's like, yeah, but that's
No.
not you're not asking the right question.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they just focus on the limited liability, and it's
Right.
like, again, yes, that's an important part of what comes out of incorporating your
But
business,
it's not the only thing to look at.
yeah, that's not the only thing to look at. You need to ask yourself how much money you're making, and are you going to need all of that to live? If the answer is yes, that you're going to need all of that money to live, then 9 times out of 10, it doesn't make sense for you to incorporate your business, and I will fight you. I don't know. I just get so riled up because, I hear people focusing, like the conversation drifts towards other things, and they miss that one piece.
Right.
And it's so important. It's so critical.
Cool.
Okay, hopefully this has been helpful. Do we want to finish? So we have to share this story now, this embarrassing story. 'Cause
cliffhanger
we
story.
teased it out. So do you want? I feel like you tell it so much
the
better than I do.
dumbest story.
It's so embarrassing, and I really hope that those who are listening or watching recognize that, like, just take away from this experience that, like, we're not perfect, right? We make mistakes. Oh man, it's so embarrassing though. I don't want people to hear this and think like, wow, I can't trust anything that those two people say, because this is like literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. Like I'm never
sure
going to listen to
everyone's done something similar.
I don't know. This is bad. This is really bad. Okay, tell the story.
Okay, so we're staying at this hotel, and because we're cheap, actually, it's not so much that we're
No.
cheap. Okay, so we went to Banff, and a lot of the restaurants there are really fancy and stuff, and we have 3 really little kids, and we didn't want to go out to a restaurant to eat
Right.
that night, and so we were like, let's just bring with us a lasagna.
Well, and the other thing,
Costco lasagna.
the other thing too, we weren't able to leave until
Yeah, it got really
until
late.
later in the day, and we wanted to be able to. So it's the dead of winter, and they have these outdoor pools that are hot. Like they're not hot springs, but kind of the same.
It's just
idea.
like a big hot tub.
Yeah, just a giant hot tub outside, and so it's really fun for the kids to like. No, it's freezing outside, but
You're
we're
like
also
in the
this
mountains and yeah.
hot tub. Yeah, and so we knew we wanted to spend time doing that, and it was going to get late, and we also had this kitchen in our hotel.
Yeah,
like
I had
we
like
knew
this
that that's
full kitchen. Yeah.
yeah, that's what we were paying for, and so we might as well just bring our own food. Why-
Yeah.
We don't need to justify to these people why we wanted to bring lasagna so that we could make this lasagna for ourselves. Continue.
Okay. So we go to preheat the oven, and then we were planning on cooking the lasagna while we go to the pool, come back, lasagna, boom, great. So we go to turn it on, and I'm like about to put the
It
lasagna
was
in.
me. Don't put. I need to be the one that's thrown under the bus because I was the one that turned the oven
Okay.
on.
Yes, you were right, and then
And I was like, it's not-
And then I go
Oh,
over
no.
to go put it in because I'm like, oh, surely it's preheated by now or whatever. Oh, and the little red light wasn't on. You know how you turn and
Yeah.
usually a red light.
So it's an old oven.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
old with all the dials.
Right.
And there's nothing digital on this thing. And so I open it up and I'm like, there's no heat coming from this. Like I stuck my hand in there and I could like touch the burner if I wanted to. I was like, it's totally cold. Like it is not
Yeah,
on.
It's not on.
And it had been on for like
10 minutes.
for like 10 minutes. Should have been hot. I was like, what is happening here? And so both of us looked at it. We're fiddling with all the dials, and I was like, oh, maybe it's not plugged in or something. No, we turned on the stove, like the burner, and the burners were working. And so we're like, no, it's just the oven element's not working. Something's
Right.
wrong with this. And so we fiddle around. I was like, I can't figure this out. Like our kids were getting super hangry by then and the lasagna takes like over an hour
Yeah.
to cook. So I was
Yeah.
like, we need to get this lasagna in the oven. And even I'm like brainstorming what we could do. I was like, well, what are we gonna do? We have this stupid lasagna. I was like, well, maybe like if we call down to the lobby, maybe they could heat it up in a different oven. Like bring it back.
Yeah.
Because even we're like, well, they're gonna have to move us to a different unit. We had already like the kids are like jumping on the beds and stuff already by then, and I was like, this
Yeah.
is just bad. So as we call down to the lobby, and I'm like, hi, our oven's not working, and so right away they're like, yeah, we'll send the maintenance guy up. So wait around for about 10 minutes. All of a sudden there's a knock at the door. So the maintenance guy comes waltzing in, and he's like, what seems to be the problem? So oh well, the oven's not working. So
And he was a young guy, like
was a
our
young guy,
age.
yeah.
Yeah.
and he's like, and I said to him, the stove element's not working, but the oven's not. We're trying to make this lasagna. And he just kind of looks over at both of us, and then he says, oh, well, you just gotta, and then he turns this other knob that's off, and then bake. Or I think the other option was broil, right? It's like
Yeah,
either off,
yeah.
broil, or bake. He's like, he just like turned it, and then he looked at me like,
Yeah.
you're embarrassed, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I was just like dumbfounded. I was like, oh, sorry, our one at home is really different than this one. Or,
Yeah.
I'm trying to like make excuses for myself. I was like,
No, you just
Sorry.
got to own it.
and then
Yeah.
I was just like, and we did. We're like, we're really dumb. And I was like, I am so sorry for wasting your time.
Yeah, we all had a good laugh,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure we tried to get him to promise that he wouldn't tell everyone, but for sure he
We're like,
like
now we know you're gonna go back to your buddies
Yeah.
and be like, so
like
there
the
was-
idiots in 122 don't know how to turn the oven on.
don't know how to turn it from off
Well, that's so
to
stupid.
on.
So there's two dials. Think about
Yeah.
this. Think about just. I feel like people need to really be able to picture this in their mind. So
Right,
there's
right.
two dials on opposite ends of
Yeah.
the stove.
Yeah, because like in the middle is the clock, and then on the two other sides are the stove ones.
Right.
And then one side of the clock is this on-off switch, and then on the other side of the clock
It's
is
the temperature.
The temperature. So we had turned on the temperature
Right.
one.
Right. So dumb. Well, and what is frustrating too is the dial that's just the temperature. When it's in the off position, like it says off.
That's true.
Like it
does
says
say
off above that
Yeah,
dial.
Yeah.
And so I think any Kate, again, it's been a long day. We've just driven in the car for 2 hours with 3 crazy children. We're just like I know how to work an oven, but like in that tired moment of desperation, you're like, you just forget how to do these things. And so you make complete fools out of yourselves.
I'll just never forget the way he looked over him. He was just like, yeah.
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 I was too ashamed to even look at him. I was just like, I'm just going to back away and just hide myself in the other room.
So have you tried turning it on?
Yeah. So what lesson are we supposed to take away from this?
My takeaway is sometimes I feel, my takeaway was like, sometimes I feel like I know what I'm doing, but I really don't. And I just need to ask the expert for help. Even when it's like, I should know how to do this. And this is why I'm so grateful that I'm married to you. Because like hearing you talk about about the accounting things. It's like, thank you, that makes so much sense. But on my own, I'd be totally floundering and wasting so much of my time trying to figure it out, when if I had just asked an expert, it would have made so much more sense. And so I think my takeaway is, if you're confused about something, ask an expert and they'll point you in the right direction. And
Right.
yeah, that's my takeaway.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to stay in touch, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We've included the links to these in the show notes. Also, be sure to check out our website, onlinewellness.ca, if you need any continuing education credits. All of our courses have been approved by massage associations across Canada. Anyways, we'll catch you next time.